I'm exhausted, to be honest with you. I'm pretty tired.
Did something happen this last weekend that's got everybody up in an upheaval? Did something happen?
Yeah. So something happens. Honestly, but so again, I get into it. We got the college football rankings, the final edition release, so we know who's going to be in the playoff, who's not going to be in the playoff, who got hosed, who did not get hosed, who got the benefits of the conference that they play in, and who got in based on merit, and who got in based on marketing, lobbying, fiscal reasons. We that is all known now. And if I'm being honest, Russell, I when Alabama won on Saturday, I was afraid that they would leave Texas out. As we're a Big 12 podcast. We got a Big 12 lean to it. We're very passionate about the league. I thought that they were going to find a way to be like, hey, yes, Texas did beat Alabama by 10 points in their home stadium. But, they just beat Georgia. They're one of the 4 best teams in the country. So that's where I thought it was going to go. And then that, fear kind of eased down as the day went on. And then Florida State played, and they won because they're a really good football team. And that's what really good football teams do. They're on the 3rd quarterback, still win a conference championship. Still, first, not only did they cover the spread against Louisville, they also covered the spread against Florida with their backup quarterback, covered the spread in a game mostly played by their backup quarterback 2 weeks ago. So they're winning games by bigger margins than expected, despite not having Jordan Travis, who, by the way, is evidently so valuable that he, derailed the whole season for Florida State by getting injured, but is also not a Heisman finalist. So I guess he's not that valuable in the eyes of voters. But they won. Their defense was awesome. They aren't going to light up the scoreboard, but also Michigan didn't either. And there's no thought about them getting left out. In fact, you could say that Florida State had a better game than Michigan did. And Louisville is ranked higher than the team that Michigan played. So I don't know how you can look at that and be like, oh, well, this team shouldn't be in the college football playoff. However, it's not up to me, Drew Russell. As you know, it's up to a small committee filled with college administrators, former coaches, 0 people who do football full time. It's just a couple of administrators for universities. But they decided they know. So that's where we're at.
That is where we're at, isn't it? It's just we're going to go down a lot of different rabbit holes in this episode because there's a lot to break down in general. Number one, this is the Big 12 podcast. We do have a Big 12 representative who I know will not be in the conference next year, but Texas is in the playoff.
Big 12. They won a Big 12 championship.
That is a Big 12 championship. Brent Yormark, he got the booze rained down on him on Saturday. Shout out to our guy Steve Sarkisian. He tried to, rein him in a little bit, but you weren't going to stop Texas fans. They were going to boo.
No. And also quick shout out to Yormark for, sitting in it and enjoying it. There was another sticky situation up north with the Big Ten, Tony Petitti, who recently suspended Jim Harbaugh for the toughest stretch of their season after getting peer pressured by the coaches in his league. And he did not. He was like, hey, Joel Klatt, you can give him the trophy. You can present to you the master of ceremonies. Now that might have been planned. I don't know how charismatic Tony Petitti is compared to Brett Yormark, but shout out Brett. He had some harsh words about Texas and Oklahoma throughout the season, and awkward moment, but he stood tall.
He embraced those boos, and so we do have a Texas a Texas Longhorn team that's in, which. Pretty much the moment Alabama beat Georgia, I thought, all right, well, there's no way they're keeping, put Alabama in and Texas out. So you kind of felt like you knew that they were going to make the playoff. A great season, one that, non-conference scheduling helped them. Clearly, that might have been something that really helped them get in. Kind of good timing this year to play Bama on the road, a Bama team that, to put bluntly, first month of the season looked horrible. And even in parts of the later part of the season, didn't look too good at times.
Yeah, I'd say Thanksgiving weekend, they also looked pretty horrible. But
I was going to say,
it's a game I watched. I don't think the committee watched that game, but
tough to say.
I did. We did, Drew Russell. We watched every minute of that game.
You know, Auburn only lost by 21 to New Mexico State the week before, but almost got a victory the next week against a Bama team. That's, you know, it is what it is, right? I don't know what else to say, but I will say this, Brandon. It was good timing for Texas at that time. They took advantage. They had a good Big 12 regular season slate. No shame in the Oklahoma loss. Had a couple close calls, but on Saturday did what they were supposed to do and beat an Oklahoma State team that had 3 tiers their season, where they had a really bad start, played a month and a half of extremely good football, and then the last 3 weeks, really 4 weeks to be honest, were lost and didn't play even remotely their best football. Still a great season, though. They got a good bowl game. We'll get into that later. Just in terms of this all, though, Brandon, it's amazing how it played out. We talked a little bit about it last week. What if we get a scenario where Bama beats Georgia and all the favorites win? And that's exactly what we got.
This was that chaos scenario.
This was the chaos scenario that I was like, if this happens, what do they do? And we got it. I couldn't believe we got it. That Washington beats Oregon. They were near 10-point dogs. They found a way to get a victory. You couldn't keep them out. Michigan pretty much was a shoo-in, and they were against the team that looked pretty helpless. I even had one Iowa fan text me and said, I thought their offense wasn't that bad, which tells you everything you need to know. That's not a joke. They were like, it could have been worse. They could have been worse, and I didn't fight it.
I believe it, yeah.
And then you get a victory for Florida State over Louisville. I'm not saying it was the prettiest game of all time, but they did what they had to do. They muddied it up. They had more yards of offense than Michigan did against Iowa. That's a factual statement. So you get those
you also got to realize that Michigan's without their star center, the real anchor of that team, since the Ohio State game. I think they're a totally different ball team now without him. Of course, that's just my opinion. Obviously, not the opinion of the 13 college administrators who are deciding the fate of college football. Didn't factor that in. Oddly enough, haven't factored that in the 10 years of playoff selections. Oddly enough, it's December. Every team has injuries, but it's something I noticed.
It literally was a nightmare scenario for the committee in terms of what to do with the SEC, because then Bama wins, Texas wins. And, a lot of people, myself included, Saturday afternoon going into the night, I'm thinking on paper, Florida State wins. They can't put an SEC team in.
No.
There's no way. It doesn't make sense. And they did. And I kind of initially thought, I think this is a done deal. But then this was before that game was played. I watched the Fox pregame show, and I was shocked when they're all like, well, Florida State's out no matter what. And I'm thinking, man, there is like legit cohesiveness there. And then Sunday morning, late Saturday night, Sunday morning, watching a little ESPN. Wow, there is some bizarre cohesiveness here. Like, Bama's going to make it and Florida State's out. And I thought, this is a Power 5 champ. And this isn't exactly a pushover in Florida State either. It's not a no-name school. It's a team that's won multiple national championships. And for this to go down the way it did, Brandon, the committee had a decision that was going to tick off one fan base a lot. And I think they they struck a nerve with, I'll say, the majority of college football fans with this decision to keep Florida State out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It doesn't. I get the argument for Alabama is you want the 4 best teams, and sure, but also that's never been what's happened. That's never been the case in this 10-team playoff. And frankly, I was kind of going to bed last night stewing over this some more, and I'm like, boy, aren't we lucky that it's been 10 years now, and this is the first opportunity that the College Football Playoff Committee has had to really screw things up. And they've really had their hands tied with every single year. Got kind of dicey in year one with a debate between Ohio State and TCU. You have to look at it. You have a one-loss Power 5 champion who had a tough loss early in the season, has since bounced back, and they look awesome right now. And then you have Ohio State, who, stumbled early, lost a quarterback early, lost their second quarterback early. Does that sound familiar? Well, they ended up overlooking that scenario pretty conveniently. And to their credit, it worked out. Ohio State then beat Alabama and won the national championship. They looked like one of the 4 best teams. They looked like the best team, to be honest with you, because they were given that opportunity. They took care of business in their conference, just like Florida State did. And yeah, I get it. You could make the case that Alabama's the better team because they would be favored if they were to play together. Oregon was favored by almost double digits last week. What happened to that? Washington, by the way, the 2 seed, has been underdogs in 2 of their last 3 games. So let's not act like Vegas knows everything. Bama was a 1.5-touchdown favorite over Texas at home, lost by double digits. This is a 17-point swing, 17.5-point swing at home. So that doesn't matter, right? Nobody gave TCU any chance last year against Michigan, and that flipped it. And also, by the way, another pet peeve, and I'm looking at you, Stephen A. Smith. People are using TCU as the prime example for, well, this is why you want the 4 best teams instead of the 4 most deserving teams. Hey, motherfucker, how about you start yelling at the committee by putting in a team as fraudulent as Michigan last year, and maybe they would have beaten TCU, and then we get a better national championship game. Let's start there. So it's crazy that people are much more angry at TCU for losing to Georgia than they are at Michigan for losing to TCU, but that's a side rant.
It's a necessary side rant, I will say.
Yeah, and on the flippity flop, if you do decide to put Florida State in, then you can point to on-field results being the indicator that, okay, well, it's tough. Alabama has gotten a lot better. By the way, Alabama's not the only team that's gotten better since September, so I don't want to hear any of that. They're not the only team to improve over the season, so that's not everything. They did lose a football game, double digits at home. I didn't have time to do this, but I promise if you look through playoff year by playoff year, there's not many teams who lose by double digits at home and get into the conference college football playoff. Alabama's a different beast. Whatever. But you have 3 undefeated Power 5 champions who took care of business, and Florida State in particular, who scheduled 2 Power 5 conference opponents in LSU and Florida. And now I would argue that those aren't very strong games because the SEC stinks, but in the eyes of the College Football Playoff Committee, that should be such a gold standard. By the way, they beat one of those SEC teams with their backup quarterback.
I know, on the road too.
On the road, and they've taken care of business, and they don't look as pretty without Jordan Travis. I get it, but they also have taken care of business. They've still looked like a very good football team, and a team that should at the very least be given an opportunity based on the field and everything that based on the results of the games. Because also, here's the thing, Drew Russell. Let's say we're in a chess league. How do we determine who's the best chess player? By whoever wins the most games.
Yeah, sounds right to me.
And all of a sudden now it's like, okay, well, we don't like Drew's strategy. So even though he's undefeated and Brandon hasn't won a single game, we think there's a lot of promise here. We think he's gotten a lot better since the start of the chess season. We're going to put him in the top 4 and give him a chance. That's not how it should be. And now, and we were talking a little bit before the show. Granted, it's never been great. It's never been a great system. It's always been kind of weird, determining a national champion. But this system in particular stinks. It's always stunk. We've just haven't had the opportunity to really face the reality of the bad system that we have in place.